There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb, babe. I got
I
you,
got
babe.
you, babe. Why
I
are we doing
got
this?
you, babe. I got you, babe. It's Groundhog Day.
Again? No.
Well, see, we do the exact same thing tomorrow. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Book Club for Movies. Amy and Samir here. It is Tuesday, February 2nd. It is Groundhog Day. We're going to be saying that a lot. You'll be hearing it a lot if you watch today's movie. But hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Samir, how is your Tuesday going?
No, it's just a normal old Tuesday. Sunny, bright, unwinter-like today. You know, typical schizophrenic California Bay Area weather.
Yeah. Well, I heard that Puxatawny Phil did see his shadow, which means 6 more weeks of winter. I don't understand why anyone thinks that wouldn't be the case.
It's like if he can't see, then maybe he won't say. So if we have a blind groundhog, then winter is canceled?
I don't know. Because also, like, if there's a
hello, thank
shadow,
you.
wouldn't that maybe suggest that, like, the sun is out casting a shadow, which would mean that maybe it's not cloudy, which means maybe it. I don't know.
I don't get it either, but we've been Benedict Mueller has wished us a happy Groundhog Day from Germany, so thank you. Same to you, good sir.
Yeah, I don't know who put a groundhog in charge of the weather, but.
And also, how do you know if the groundhog saw its shadow or not?
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. Like, do we have this sophisticated and understanding of groundhog facial expression and behavior to understand that, oh no, he hasn't seen a shadow? That means the winter is over.
I don't know. I don't know. But we will be talking about Groundhog Day. Californians should not be complaining about the weather. You know what, David? Okay. It was in the 60s today, all right?
I love that Amy always thinks the 60s is cold. However,
I'm drinking hot chocolate.
Because the first time I visited home, I think I've told you this over, the first time I visited home from Berkeley after I moved up here, I went home and I left San Francisco. I flew out of San Francisco and I was like really cold, so it was all bundled up. Then I got to San Diego and it was like blue, cloudless sky and bright sun. And I was like, Jesus, okay, I'm so hot. So I take off the big coat and I take off the sweater and then I take off the shirt and I'm like down to just my undershirt and I'm like so hot. I'm like, I feel like I'm swelteringly hot. And I get into the car finally, my sister picks me up and I'm like, can you turn on the air conditioning? It is so hot. And she's like, air conditioning's broken in this car, but also, what do you mean it's hot? It's 52 degrees outside. And I'm like, no, that's not right. I'm like, look, there's like no clouds. And she like pointed at the temperature in the car and it said 52. I'm like, no, this can't be right. But they were all like, they were cold. And I was like, how can you be cold? This is a warm, sunny, beautiful day.
Yeah.
It's crazy how just being away for a little while made a 52-degree day feel incredibly warm to the point that normally.
Yeah, Berkeley's different from like San Francisco weather because it's more inland. I mean, it certainly can get colder in general than down here, but I don't know. San Francisco to me was always like the wind chill.
I loved those days where it was so there would be days when it was so windy in San Francisco where you'd like try to walk up the street, you'd be walking against wind and you would be like walking in slow motion. And you would see people's hats like flying off, their scarves and flying back behind them. People I've never. It gets nutty, but you're right. California, on the whole, we are very blessed with our weather. So you are correct. Oh, look, PJ's here. Hi, PJ. And Walter's
we
back.
did not plan on wearing both of us wearing plaid. This just happened.
Yes, it was not planned. But also, see, David's in New York City, which is being pummeled by a really terrible storm.
A little blizzard
right now.
It's fine, you know.
My sisters, I have two sisters in Connecticut, so like they're like, oh, we're not going to get as much snow as other places. We're going to be fine where we are, but like, I mean, fine is like, you know, more snow than I've ever seen. But you know, it is really different trying to prepare for winter on the East Coast. Like I still remember my sisters when they were start talking about having to save up for firewood and oil for the winter, and I'm like, what? I'm like, are you starring in Little Women? Like, what's going on? Why is that necessary? And I was oh, fireplaces actually work in these houses. You can actually use them, and you need to, because it's incredibly freezing cold. Walter's from Chicago. Damn. Yeah, I've only heard stories about how insanely freezing cold it gets there. So we are blessed, acknowledged. But the groundhog seeing his shadow claims that there will be 6 more weeks of this. Who knows what the Earth really has in store? For all we know, like, I mean, last year it was like 70, 80 degrees in January in New York City at some point. Wasn't it? Isn't there a day last January where it was like, what is going on with the weather?
Yeah,
like, this is
weather's crazy. Weather is very crazy. And hi, and yes, hi, Andres. Thanks to you for hopping in here. Yeah, so we will be talking about Groundhog Day, but before we go into Groundhog Day, yesterday was our first day of highlighting Black History Month, and we went with Mr. Walter Murray's Patreon pick of A Raisin in the Sun. We talked about Sidney Poitier. I hadn't seen this before. I think you hadn't seen this either, Samir.
Not for really long. It was one of those ones that you would see on Turner Classic Movies every now and then, and I'd watch parts of it, but I'd never sat down and watched it from beginning to end.
Oh, this was a downer. So I loved it. I was definitely, it was more like towards the end of it where I was just like, what else is going to happen to this family?
Right? And like, you know, it's another one of those stories that like it's based on a play where you were inside like one environment, this cramped apartment with these characters a lot of the time. And most of the time the film avoids the trap of sort of falling into like, you know, the still Cameron monologues competing for attention kind of thing that can happen.
It was, I thought it was a good stage to screen adaptation as far as
kind
that
of goes. Like the Rose Tattoo. Like it makes the most out of this one small little, like, you know, that I love when the film opens and you have all these sort of cross-hatched lines and shadows and light, like all sort of creating this very sort of stormy atmosphere in a way. Like, you know, that things are not great in this apartment. I was also surprised by some of the topics that it broached. I had completely forgotten that it actually, I mean, very lightly touches on, like, you know, reproductive choice as an option, and and yes, there was.
So, no matter what race you are, you can still be homophobic.
Well, you know, there's also I feel like those lines, like I don't know if I would characterize the character as, well, no, I would say that the comments were homophobic, but I thought that those lines were sort of part of that depiction of toxic masculinity, how masculinity becomes, you know, something toxic. You know, there's an intersectional commentary there as well. Like, you know, it's very, you know, for my family, it was almost like being gay didn't exist in a way, you know. So it was one of those things where he's trying to reclaim power throughout the movie, and the only way that most men know how to reclaim power, at least in the face of other men that they maybe feel are more accomplished or have had better chances than they have. So a lot of men will revert to an insult that they think will bring down that other man. And so that happens in a lot of other communities of color, where there's almost like a heightened emphasis on your masculinity and your femininity. Like the gender roles are even more pronounced. And so you're always in this battle to uphold this idea of masculinity. And so he's a character who, you know, lives with all these other women who are all very strong-willed and, you know, not willing to back down just because he's a man. And so he feels kind of like he's lost his power. And so that is an element of most men. When they lose their power, you will see that kind of behavior come out. So like, you know, like when he starts saying those words, I was like, oh my God, I forgot about these lines too. But that was how I interpreted it, is in the story. So I wasn't necessarily seeing him as homophobic, but seeing him as someone who felt powerless in the presence of people who have it better than him. Because he's constantly, everyone in the story is like trying to improve their lives in some way. Yeah, common in sports too, Walter. Yes, exactly. Like any place where masculinity is prized, you will see more homophobia because people are constantly trying to live up to that. And like, hey, if I can't get to that ideal and somebody else is closer to it, what can I say to try to bring them down to my level or below? And that is like the thing that they'll go to. So I thought it was such a brave and brilliant play because of those things. Because it basically, you know, we were talking about how Sidney Poitier became like, you know, he had a lot of times he had to play these like almost like saintly good characters. And here is like a really rich, complex, not necessarily likable on the surface kind of character. And you get to see this person with all their flaws and make all their mistakes. And it's really painful because you also, you know, when that, oh my God, like when his friend shows up to tell him that the other guy left with the money, and it's so devastating because you've had so many conversations with all these characters about what they're going to do with this money, and there was like this big production, you know, about you know, it getting there and what they're going to do with it. So they had built up all these dreams that they could, you know, all these things that they could do, and the one thing that they could salvage was that, you know, that they had that couldn't be taken away was that house. And so it's like this moment of triumph when they decide, you know what, we're going to go for it and we're going to live in this neighborhood.
Come what
and
may.
You know what? That is, you know, because that house, there's a story. I remember reading a story recently about, oh my God, sorry. I can see right onto the roof next in front of my window. And like, it's a flat roof that's covered in water. And there's like this crow like running around and splashing in the water right now. Like I just looked up and saw it running around. But sorry, it was very distracting. It was very funny. But now I've forgotten where I was.
I'll jump in. So I think, overall the acting was just fantastic. I think with everyone involved, you know, such a small cast, every single person in there was so good. The mother was great. I love the sister, you know, trying to get in touch with her African roots and not really knowing what she's doing, but just like, this just feels right and I want to know more about us. And then Ruby Dee was just like heartbreaking. Like, ugh. She was so good, and of course Sidney Poitier was great too. But there was something so. I think the fact that this was just like kind of like an average family, that to me made this like the most depressing. Where it's like this in this plot, it's not like there's necessarily a lot of extreme circumstances. It's just like it's just kind of like average things are happening to them. They're just like in general trying to improve their life. Like they're just waiting on an insurance check, and for it to be that depressing and just like, you know, like every time you think like, oh, like they're getting a break, and then, you know, it's like, oh, the welcome committee shows up and they're like, oh, great. Oh, never mind. You don't want us to live there. Like every time it really was like one step forward, two steps back for them, like the whole time.
And so, it was hard. It was so painful to watch people struggle over, like, literally, you know, like there's that moment where the mom, she opens the envelope, she gets the check, and I'm like, why aren't you happy? And it's like it dawns on her like all those hard days and nights that her husband worked himself to death, really, from overwork to provide for this family. And it's like all of that sacrifice, and he's now gone, and all they have left is like his life is worth 10,000. That's all it was worth to this insurance company. It's like, oh, he was only worth $10,000
Which
his
was
whole
a
life.
lot more money back then.
It
But
was a lot of money, but when you think about a human life, it's just not
yeah,
worth a human life. You think
yeah,
when you like, if you got a check, if your parents drop dead right now, and then you got a check for $100,000, would you be happy with that check, or you'd be like, this is my
yeah.
entire world has fallen apart, and this is what that was worth. It was
Mhm.
worth so little in the grand scheme of the world, and so much wealth that other people have, that this is it's a very sobering thing to see a number like that on a check in place of a human being, and you're like, there's no number on that check is going to equal that human being, and that amount of money just sounds so small when you think about the person you lost. So it's like they give her that moment with that check. It's not like, yay, they don't start just dancing around because the check arrived. Like the mom's like, she's seriously thinking. You can see that in that one little moment. But I think it's a hopeful ending that they actually kept that house and
Mhm.
went there, because a lot of neighborhoods where Black people were not allowed to buy houses. I think this is like, that's how I remember. It was the story that I read about Levittown in New York. And it was like, sort of a new development, kind of like the nice neighborhood in It's a Wonderful Life. Remember when they're building that neighborhood? It's like, oh, all these people who couldn't have houses before
Yeah.
now have houses. Now they're going to have something, and this and that. So there was like this, perfect little planned community with affordable housing, and they weren't like fancy, but it was, nice, better than nothing. So all these people were able to buy houses for a small amount of money, but they wouldn't let any Black people buy houses in that neighborhood. And then years and years later, all those houses, that real estate became super, super valuable. So all the people that owned houses there became wealthy because the land and their property, exponentially grew in value. And so all these people basically, this was like a source of wealth that these families could pass down to their kids and could help provide for them. And like universally, all these Black people who tried to buy houses, and they were all denied that wealth, basically. So there were a lot of situations where Black people tried to invest in and build equity in their lives, and it was that opportunity was denied, and then the equity like blew up in value. So it's like there's this whole generation, another whole generation of Black people who were denied an access to wealth in that significant moment. So it's like in this story, it's like them keeping that house and staying there. It's like they are not, because they're not giving that up. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
They're going to keep something for themselves. It's probably, there's probably a whole other play that could be written about when they move into the neighborhood,
Definitely.
But I was thinking of that too, like when that there was some element of that, like, hey, they're investing in something that they can pass down, and that's a really important thing for families too. It was just so heartbreaking when that guy shows up with that letter after you've seen the scene of them like giving their mother gifts at this house, and they gave her the gardening tools so she can grow some, it's just like, it just hits so deeply. And I'm like, now she can grow that little tree because now she'll get fun. That tree was such a sad little symbol, but it's such a great one because it's like, it's a symbol of, how downtrodden they are and how cut off from
It's not
the
even
sun,
getting
basically.
sun. Yeah, and now it's going to have a whole yard to flourish in. But this really was great. Thank you, Walter, for suggesting this movie. This movie definitely highlights a lot of struggles that the Black community went through and continues to go through. And I'm sure that's going to be a common theme in quite a few of the movies that we picked. Not all of them, but certainly a lot.
Yes.
Awareness.
And Walter's been giving us tons of great info, personal info, like about his story, and also I love this little note about the actors. You could tell that the actress who played the mom in the movie was she was a perfect choice because there's a very domineering quality to her. And so you could almost sense that competition between like great orators in a play, whenever each of them spoke, because she had a pretty booming voice herself, very commanding. But thank you for everything you contributed to this conversation, Walter, and thank you, as Amy said, for selecting this movie. It was really wonderful way to start off the month, to really experience this whole story, which should have done a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad I have finally seen this. I hope I get a chance to see the play of this at some point. I am slightly curious to watch the 2008 version of this now with Sean Combs, just for comparison. Probably not going to be nearly as good as this. If you didn't get a chance to see A Raisin in the Sun, the 1961 version, it's available to rent right now. Yeah, so check it out. But today it's Groundhog Day. We just knew this is the movie we were going to do on February 2nd, no matter what day it fell on, unless it was a weekend, because we don't do shows on the weekend. But we had to put this in here sometime this week. Groundhog Day, the 1993 romantic comedy fantasy. A weatherman finds himself inexplicably living the same day over and over again. Directed by Harold Ramis, starring Bill Murray and Andy McDowell, and a great ensemble cast. This movie won a BAFTA for Best Screenplay.
It's pretty much the best screenplay that Harold Ramis ever wrote. Didn't he write
well,
this?
He helped, but it's also Danny Rubin. And Danny Rubin, I guess I was reading if you go on the IMDb page, the trivia section for this movie is pretty interesting. But after this came out, there were like 2 or 3 screenwriters that were trying to sue him, saying like, you stole this concept, like not Groundhog Day, but just the idea of someone living the day over and over again. And he was like, actually, I took it from, there was some like Christmas story thing in like the late 1800s or something. He's like, it was called like the Eternal Christmas or whatever it was. He's like, I actually took it from that. So I haven't read your little screenplay. I didn't take it from that. I'm really looking forward to watching this movie. This movie just covers so much of just like really like what would you do in this situation, and I really wonder why they picked Groundhog Day of all days. Or maybe there was something of like it's just like it's kind of a big deal for this little town, but in the scheme of things it's not like a super special day. Maybe there was something in it being mundane that made them pick Groundhog Day. David's here saying, I feel like Bill Murray is an acquired taste. I think he's hilarious. I love him too. But I had read today that one of the top choices for this character was Tom Hanks. And Harold Ramis said that he thought he was too nice for this role. And some other people I would consider were Chevy Chase, John Travolta, and then like one other person. And all of them, Harold Ramis just kept saying like, Bill Murray just has that mean streak about him that this character needs. So he basically got this role because equal parts funny and mean and can be charming as well. Other fun facts I had read about this was the actual groundhog in this. It bit Bill Murray pretty hard, like a couple times, to the point where he had to get like a rabies shot and get medical treatment. Those things are big.
Well, we see it in the movie. It's like a pretty substantial little beast who I have no idea how exactly it evolved into a creature who, whereupon winter is dependent on it seeing its shadow. That's not something you will learn from this story either.
You're right, Luke. It was not shot in Pennsylvania. It was shot in Woodstock, Illinois. And I guess the street corner where Bill keeps stepping into the puddle and the guy comes over, was like, Phil? There's a little plaque that says like Phil's Corner. And so I want to go there. I have one of my best friends lives in Illinois, and I'm not sure how far away Woodstock is from her, but I want to go because I geek out on movie locations. So I want to go to Woodstock, Illinois.
Put it on the list
to see this. Another thing they were talking about of like kind of like how far do they go? I mean, this character goes through like kind of taking advantage of all of this, living it up, to being incredibly depressed. I mean, there's so many days where he just like instantly commits suicide just to get to the next day. And one thing they talked about was like they could have gone even darker. You know, he didn't really explore murder or like torturing people or
True, they did not go that far
no.
with this, but you know, they were also not wanting to. They wanted it to still be in a way it's still lighthearted. You know, I think it's hard to bring it back from that. Like it was. I mean, the scenes, trigger warning. You know, the scenes where he starts trying to kill himself to end this day because it's become so monotonous. You know, that is about as far I think as they could go without the, you know, because they end up trying to make humor out of it in the end. I think if they went further than that, it would be difficult to maintain the tone that they wanted for the film.
Yeah, like actually it's romance.
Like now he's a serial killer, but none of his victims die. Like that is an interesting story, but it's not this one. This one's about him learning something else about himself, not his murderous intent.
When I was looking up this movie today, I was oh yeah, this is kind of what I was just about to say here. Here's someone saying, the irony of Groundhog Day is our first minister came out today and said 6 more weeks of lockdown. I wonder if she chose the 2nd February to make the announcement deliberately. I was reading a couple things today about, I don't know, people must write about Groundhog Day like every year. But
yes.
they were saying that there's kind of something different about watching it this year where we all have kind of been living in this same pattern or people who are actually following lockdown rules.
Yeah.
Like we just kind of feel like we're just like, okay, it's another day. I'm still at home. This is it. Like I'm not going anywhere.
You know, like I made dinner and the dishes have to be washed again. It seems like I do this every night. You know, everything feels like, you know, we've lost a sense of time. You know, does it even matter what the day is outside? You know, I mean, obviously it does because, you know, people are still able to, some people at least are taking walks and bike rides and going on socially distanced hikes and things like that. But for the most part, it's really just like repeating the same, feels like everybody's repeating the same day over and over and over again until we can emerge safely in groups again. So it does add an extra bit of an extra patina of personal touch that everyone will relate to in the movie now. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we are not rewatching the same episodes of Jeopardy every day. But it's interesting to see his evolution, you know, like, but through reliving this every day. Because he talks to other people and it's like, you know what it's like to do the same thing every day. And no, it doesn't make any difference. And they're like, you just described my life.
Yeah. You're Brian saying, I think they figured out he lived the same day for many years. Yeah. What I had read, someone actually went through and said that I think it was like in just this movie, it shows like 38 separate days. Harold Ramis said that he pictured that it was more like 10 years.
I mean, that's really long. They did not necessarily.
Medium.
I was going to say, I don't know if it came across that it was 10 years, but you did get the sense that, I mean, he learned to play piano and, you know, like the things that he memorized, you know, that takes a lot of times of it being repeated before you can recite everything verbatim like that. Like there are certain scenes where I'm like, oh my gosh, if this is where you're at now, I'm like, how are you going to do this again tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's memorized every.
Some of that piano playing actually was Bill Murray because I guess he doesn't know how to read music, but he learned it by ear.
That's how I played violin. I've always had trouble reading music, but I can, if you know how to play the instrument, I can, you know, like I learned to play the violin, I learned all the scales, learned where all the fingerings were, but I could not read a page of music as easily and learn the song or whatever as easily as like if I heard it, then I could mimic it. Mm-hmm. And I was the same way. I still have trouble reading music. It's not easy for me. Sight singing. I took a sight singing class at Berkeley, which was pure torture. because it was to try to learn to read music. It didn't work. So I'm impressed. I didn't know that he could play piano. I didn't know that was him. I guess you can usually tell when it'll be fun to watch it from that aspect too, just those little bits. Because I used to study that.
Fingers on the keys and they match.
How do they edit the scene? Is it all in one shot where you see the hands connected to the body, or you see the hands, or then they cut to a different angle to show them from above and you don't see their hand? It's like you're always trying to analyze the way they've edited those moments, and if you played the instruments, and you can always tell when they're just like throwing their hands around and they're not. It may as well be the kitty at the keyboard.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to watch this, and I think with some of the articles I was looking at today, I think one thing to take from watching this movie after the year that we have had and the upcoming months, because we're not out of the blue yet with the pandemic, but I think it's something to think of, like, well, really try and take advantage of the situation that you're in, seize the day. You'll get through it. One day you'll wake up and the radio will be playing a different song.
And it'll be the Roaring '20s all over again. Also, like somebody brought in a military. Talent 6 Productions here has commented that Groundhog Day became a term to describe the feeling of being in the military on deployment. Same concept, doing the same thing every day.
Yeah, I remember there was a meme going around this last November during election week. It'd be like, well, it's election day again.
Anything that repeats now, we feel like is a Groundhog Day moment. You're like, everything. So it's like, oh, well, we lost out on having all the holidays on perfect days this last year. That was the most painful thing to lose. But you know what? We didn't relive Groundhog's Day for 10 years, so we're not doing that bad.
Could be better. And yes, this Michael Shannon is in this. This was his film debut. Yeah, I like Michael Shannon. But please watch this tonight. This is available on AMC. You could either get it on the app. For some reason, I was only able to get it on the app if I found the movie on Apple TV, and then
did you search for it?
If I went directly to the AMC app, it didn't show it, but it's also playing on TV. If you have cable, it's playing all day. They're having a Groundhog Day marathon on AMC.
They're trying to they're doing the Christmas Story thing with Groundhog Day now.
Well, that's what I saw. I think they're playing it all day. So
you'll be in a time loop
somewhere. Yeah, but please check this out. I'm really excited to watch this. This movie makes me happy, and I'm glad we talked about it today.
Yes.
Tomorrow we are doing, for Woman Crush Wednesday, we are doing our Angela Bassett Day Take 2. We had her on the calendar last January, and that was the day of the Capitol insurrection situation. And we decided not to do a show that day, given everything that was going on. And we were like, well, we can't just sweep Angela Bassett under the rug and move on. We have to highlight her. And so we are doing her tomorrow. Hopefully nothing bad happens tomorrow. Knock on wood. I'm finding wood to knock on. If I don't do that, something will happen. But join us tomorrow for this muscles. If you like shapely arms, you gotta check out Angela Bassett tomorrow, because all the arm goals, my god. But please watch Groundhog Day. Join us tomorrow as we discuss all the fun moments of it tomorrow, followed by our Angela Bassett discussion. Hi and bye, Crystal. Watch Groundhog Day. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.